to do their
cover
portion of the
everything.
work.
All right, guys, we're going to call the meeting to order. It's Thursday, May 17th, 11 a.m. Capital Program Committee present. Christy Kickham, Jason Bridges, Richard Hussey, Matt Lowell, Peter Kaiser, myself, and our ex officios. And there's no members of the public here. We'll skip public comment. Roll call's done. Get a motion to approve minutes of the April 12th meeting that were distributed. There being no nays, those are accepted by unanimous consent. Discussion, we're going to discuss two topic areas. One is the fiscal 19-year recommendations, and the other is the upcoming capital review process and schedule. And Libby, you've got a handful of FY20 and other that we'll cover a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So we're also going to cover just a few preliminary FY20 and out-year potential changes, and we'll talk more about how that's going to play in when we review the schedule. So what I was hoping to do this morning, guys, is we've gone through the process of putting together some recommendations in our FY19 report, and we've got a meeting today and next week to maybe work these in and review them. So I was hoping we could just take a bite out of the apple today and then move on to the FY20 stuff. From the top, I'm going to kind of jump around with these a little bit, but I'm looking at page 8 of our FY19 report. It's titled Procedural Recommendations. And we're looking at, one moment please, this morning. Okay. One of the topics, just from the top of the list, is to introduce it as funding and whether the town should consider an increase in the town's annual minimum. Currently, it's 1% of the total local receipts from the prior year and 1% of the total real estate and personal property taxes from the prior fiscal year. In FY19, that was just a little bit under $1 million versus approximately $65 million in ask. And I don't think we were not suggesting a particular number. What we were asking to do is tie this into a process whereby biannually a capital improvement plan capacity and funding analysis would occur, which is on page 9. So these two are linked. Page 9 would be at the top of the page. And what the concept there was, just as a refresher, was that to keep everybody reasonably informed with respect to capacity and asks, so comparing the potential funding requests versus the town's capacity and various strategic planning along the fiscal policy lines, modeling the 10-year SIP to come up with the debt burden and looking at what the prospective debt issuance is and what are the other relevant metrics, so that information could then inform what the annual would be for the funding amount that we spoke of, which is currently 1%, if that's adequate, or if it should perhaps go up, and if it should go up, by how much. And that would become part of a process where it would be reviewed. Perhaps the funding analysis would occur biannually, but the increase or decrease to the capital percentage would be something that wouldn't, I'm not suggesting would change every 2 years. I'm just suggesting that that would be the mechanism we look at it, the lens we looked at it through. So basically what it is are we contributing enough, and how do we determine whether we're contributing enough? And so we proposed that be looked at. And my feeling on these types of things is that if we don't, any of these recommendations need our support through discussion and then our support through action if anything's gonna be done. Everybody has a full plate, and we're the ones who need to get the dialogue going. So with that, I guess my question is to Libby, how would we go about something like that? I don't anticipate it's something we would necessarily be starting this budget year, but for the future year, what would we need to put in place for something like that process to start to occur.
This biennial procedure process?
Yeah, so that we could then in turn make a recommendation, an informed recommendation to the selectmen. I just don't feel comfortable saying, gee, our asks are much larger than they've been in the past, and the trend is that will continue. We want you to we believe that the policy should be increased funding annually. I don't think that it's that simple. I think
Yeah, no, and the increased funding, if we were going to increase the minimum capital funding requirement, that has other implications on the operating budget.
Exactly. So, and that's where I thought the other financial metrics that come into play should be part of the process. It's not a matter of capital sitting down and coming up with a number.
Right. So I think generally annually, we have our financial advisor look at the 10-year capital improvement plan and do pretty much just what it's saying here. Specifically the debt burden, the prospective debt issuance, and other relevant metrics, and including things like what is retiring and how things can be smoothed out over time. So we could maybe have her come to a CAPCOM meeting at some point. Once that's been done, we just have to figure out at what point do we want that to be done. Do we do it sort of at the beginning with the projects we already know about, but we haven't yet updated the plan? You know what I mean? Just got to figure out when we want her to do that, but she can do it pretty much any time, right?
She does it all the time.
Yeah, she does it all.
I mean, we look at it to make sure. I mean, I will say this, when we recommend borrowings, we already know that the timing of that debt will allow us to remain consistent with the financial policies. We wouldn't recommend borrowings that would put us outside the way that the financial policies are written.
Sure. Which is, the cap is 12% of the general?
At 12%, and the only way that we can exceed that is through a debt exclusion that would require the two-step process.
Right.
To be approved, if we were going to exceed the 12%. But when we recommend debt to you, we've already figured out our estimate of when it's going to be actually hitting the expenditure lines. Mm-hmm. And we know that we're consistently, we model everything to make sure that we fall within the minimum number, amortizing within 10 years, and that we don't go over the secondary threshold of the 12% of operating expenses on an annual basis. Mm-hmm. So it's all calculated when we do it.
Okay.
So it is done. Which
is all very helpful, and I understood that, and I think everyone understands that now, if they didn't. But the upfront portion, I think, accomplishes more than just funding. I think it's also a demonstration by the town through its leadership and then the community that we're taking the capital. Look, a lot of this stuff is a mechanism to create dialogue, because we're going to have trending higher capital costs that are going to plateau at a level probably an order of magnitude higher than they've been over the last 10 or 15 years. Is that?
More than likely, I would agree with that, yes.
So the idea is to be generating some buzz about capital, not capital programming, but capital expenses and discussion. And I thought that might be one way to do it. And in its way, that's helpful, because we know at the very minimum, we have a certain amount in there. It's never going to be enough, ever. But at the same time, the towns and the community also know that there's a process in place. And it's part of our recommendation, and then it's part of what we all bring to the table and sit down and do. So I'm looking at it from kind of a holistic thing and not just the actual operations side, if that helps to round out the concept. I don't have a specific on when would be the best to do it. I don't know, Libby, when something like this would actually go into play with everything that's on your plate and the Board of Selectmen's plate in terms of an ask to consider an increase. So, maybe that's something that you could think about a little bit, and I can follow up with you, and we can work out when on a schedule we would want to work that in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I may, just
yes, please.
One of the times should correlate with at the start of our process, so that we're up to date on a possible increase. Or I think it should. One side should correlate to our process, and the other side should be just whatever other time in the year is convenient. Mm-hmm. But
right, I think again. So we need an expectation of what our minimum funding level is. I think on one hand, it's kind of like a theoretical number in the sense that we know that capital requests are going to be much higher than what the minimum funding is. But on the other hand, it is good to know what that number is, and then how it's addressed through the Board of Selectmen or as a policy matter is something that could be handled at a separate time. So I agree.
Yeah,
point taken.
I just don't think it should be reassessed halfway through our process.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
we should know that, and then that should be what we stick with through our process, so that we're not reevaluating halfway through.
Right.
Yeah, makes sense.
No, it makes sense. And Libby, I'm sorry, what was it you said that the process, the name, what are you calling the current, whereby this would dovetail into? Someone is doing this already?
Our financial advisor?
So you're a financial advisor and you,
Yeah, I mean, Hilltop Securities, which helps us with every bond sale, we do this, we talk about our debt amortization and impacts all the time. I mean, and like I said, when I make a proposal of what we're gonna consider to do for borrowing, we've already analyzed whether we can actually fit it in or not, and whether it will allow us to stay within those policy limits. And if we're close to them, then we certainly have other discussions, but we know that before we advise you that we recommend these to be borrowed in the general,
Richard?
My question is, when was the last time the funding percentages were changed upwards?
The 1%?
Yeah.
I don't remember it changing anytime recently.
Yeah,
What do other towns do?
it's been that as long as I can remember.
It's all over the board.
Yeah, I looked into it.
Some towns have one, some towns don't. Some towns just have dedicated amount every year, not tied to prior year revenues. There's no standard.
I mean, the only thing that I'm not saying this is an argument for or against it, because we certainly have capital needs. But when we start the budget planning process every year, that's immediately $1 million that comes right off getting us to within for the levy limit calculation. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be increased, but we have to look at that in a holistic view, because that will be additional money if we increase it that is not available for the myriad of other needs that the town manager has to manage through in a budget process. So it's not an argument for or against, it's just that it has an impact if we raise it on the other side too.
Yeah, it's a zero-sum game. I mean, we get clearly, and that's really a policy decision, obviously, by the Board of Selectmen informed through you, but I think it's one of our duties just to say, hey, let's look at it. It doesn't have to be a full meeting. It could be, 15 or 20 minutes where someone gives us a report with a recommendation based upon the debt obligations and the amortization schedule and the 12%. And we're informed and we can try and make a recommendation based on that. So maybe I'll just chat with Libby at some point. It's not right away about scheduling, something like that. Is that something you guys think we should be looking at too, or? I mean, generally, not necessarily changing it.
That wouldn't be at the top of my list of things to look at because
Yeah.
of the operating budget issue.
Gotcha.
We'd
Can I
be
just ask a
concerned about.
follow-up
Yeah,
to this?
please, Nick.
Does it go up because if the taxes, let's say we get more receipts, it's 1% of more? So
Yeah,
you get
it's
more.
automatically
Automatically.
increasing every year because it's
Just like
1%
the
of.
excise taxes.
Yeah.
I see, that's why you're not looking at it, because it's working.
Relative.
Yeah, okay.
To your point, it does go up every year.
Right. Working relative to what, though? I
So,
mean,
like, it works within the system of what we have, like, it doesn't need to go up because it's kind of going up as values go up and
Right,
growth.
but I think to brief, just tail end on interrupt on that, I think the argument could be made that it would work better from the operating standpoint if it was zero. So
Oh.
what is I guess the question is for us to be making an informed decision in terms of a recommendation of what that number would be ideally, based on a holistic review. And I agree with Libby, it's not something that's the most pressing need, it's just something that's one of our recommendations, and I think we should schedule it, and it may be that we schedule it for the tail end of the season, when we're doing mop-up.
I'm just saying.
And it stays where it is for the season.
My sort of way of looking at it is, it seems like it's a baked-in thing that works, that sort of works the way it
Right.
is,
Don't mess with it, it's working.
kind of, but.
But we'd also have to discuss a little bit, what do we want that minimum capital funding requirement to cover? Do we want it to cover all the debt service for all the projects we're gonna be, because that's way more than 1%. Or
Yeah.
do we want it to cover certain types of projects between different amounts, or?
It may be that part of the discussion may be that it's utilized for those types of things that are under 5 years.
Yeah.
That we want to target, we know that they're under $100,000 in under 5 years, and it doesn't make sense to be amortizing them over a longer period. So we use we dedicate those funds for those specific capital assets. I don't know, but I think it's worth having a discussion at some point. I don't think it's something we need to do today, but I did want to bring it up, and then we'll revisit the recommendations later in the season. So again, we're not losing track of these things. They're not part of a plan that goes on a shelf and nothing ever gets done. It's not worth, there's no sense in us sitting here doing all this if we allow that to happen, that's all. Is there any other comments, any thoughts on that? Okay. So again, I'll follow up with Libby about that, and we'll probably just tack it on at the back end of the schedule. So that's the biennial, I think the biennial and the analysis and the funding tie together. The other item to address, we'll address annual process timeline with the semi-annual procedure for capital project reporting together under schedule, which really leaves two items. One is the annual, well, we had suggested a congregational planning group type of a thing, which was to basically institutionalize planning amongst the different groups or public entities that are involved in the capital procurement process. Starting with the Board of Selectmen, the FinCom, obviously Libby and Finance, Brian and Julia. So basically the idea was to try and make a plan from all the plans and get everybody on the same page. Because there are various different plans out there. The selectmen are doing strategic planning and financial long-term planning. The FinCom has its perspective on those things. Obviously, the town admin and finance do. And the idea was that we would get together and we would start to begin a dialogue about pulling all these different plans together. The master plan is coming up for the town.
Rewrite.
The rewrite.
Kind of. Yeah.
The HDC is doing a rewrite of their guidelines, which are obviously architectural, but you may not be aware the act is to preserve the economic viability of Nantucket. So that's the whole purpose of that act, is preservation as an economic engine for the island. So there's a variety of different things going on, and it seems like a good time to perhaps be thinking about a process that we don't let things fall through the cracks. I just wanted to bring it up because it's on the radar. We haven't had a good history of getting joint meetings together and having them work out so far, so I'm not going to push it.
Well, I think the whole concept of what you're saying, Steve, is important, especially with the latest, let's not beat around the bush, the latest election, the latest, grumbling too much. We don't need housing anymore. We thought we did. Now, everything that was right is wrong. I think it's good to show that there's, strong leadership, which we already know there is, but as a whole, not just either the select board today or this person's fault tomorrow. Yeah. I'm talking about, I like the group concept and talking about breaking up the future stuff is the big one. Some things are 200 years, some things are 2 years.
Yeah.
Not everything is forever. You know what I mean?
No, I got you.
It isn't. You know what I mean?
If we're looking at a 2050, okay, so one of the things.
I like what you're saying.
The idea would be I think the idea in my mind at least, and I would like to bring to the discussion if this ever occurs, is that we're looking at, I think that there's a variety of plans that have been put together and are being maintained or developed into more maturity that address 5 and 10 year planning. Yeah. This is something that would address the 15 to 50, 30 year planning. It's a bigger picture thing that informs our goals as individuals making recommendations here at Capital Committee in a sense. It can help to inform the policymakers. It can help to inform FinCom. And I'm not suggesting that the decisions that are made in a congregational meeting are the decisions that form those long-term policies, but that's part of creating the dialogue of where are we going to be in 2050. What's going to be supporting the island's economy in our minds? What's our plan? Knowing that even the best laid plans go awry, it seems to me that it's incumbent to be planning. I don't want to overstep the capital side of it. I'm looking at it from the capital perspective and what type of asks we're going to be looking for and planning for them in advance. And we can't plan for them in advance if we don't have a plan of what the island is going to be, what it's going to grow up to be in a way. So that's kind of the perspective. I'd love to get more feedback and see if this is something you guys think we should be pursuing more. Nat, I appreciate your points, they're well taken. And then see if this is something that would be scheduled for, you know, a quiet time, like Labor Day weekend or something like that.
Can I just add one thing to what I said?
Yeah.
I just thought of, and then I won't say anything else, I promise. Consistency in committee process, like FinCom, CAPCOM, and town administration, to keep up with the change, to keep the select board, see, I said it 2 times.
Good job.
I did it twice. That's pretty good.
Was I saying Board of Selectmen?
Yes, but it's okay.
Correct me.
Because I heard that said by Steve Cohen the other night, it was funny. But anyway, because the select board changes the most of all the different boards and committees and commissions, and I think Libby would agree, that selectmen, see, I did it, 3 out of 4, that's pretty good. The select board changes more than the other boards as far as sort of following a sort of consistent path of what they want to be important to this year, or maybe every 3. It changes, it shifts, and it affects how this committee and FinCom sort of have to steer things. And I think that what you're doing is outlining something that sort of keeps new members of this, of
Consistency, you hit it.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
From, you know what I'm trying to say? And I think that would help Libby is down the road if it was, because so that you don't have to keep flip-flopping as much. You know, other than a special thing here and there, I'm talking about, you know,
Well,
being consistent.
I think what it does, if I may, and please, you guys, I like the model the FinCom has. You know, basically, there's a plan. We trust in our town departments, our town leadership, our professional resources, our staff, to do their jobs.
Yes.
And with good reason. Part of that, and so that's part of it. The other part of it is that we have a long-term plan. This side of the planning is capital, to understand what's coming down the pike. I understand our mission is, our charge is a 10-year, but I think it's important that we're looking a little longer term. And then basically what this does is, we had this discussion, bear with me a moment, we had this discussion the other day. I met with Libby and Brian and Julia about scheduling. And we talked about focusing on FY20 and then working out years in. And then we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But the idea is that ultimately what we're doing is we're so thoroughly focused on out years and having processed them that we can become like what the FinCom does. And every year we get, so FY21 hopefully will begin. FY21 requests will come in and there won't be a large deviation, if any, except for emergency stuff from the 10-year SIP. So we're focusing in a way on the exception. So it allows us time to actually get into the nitty-gritty of those particular requests that are a little bit different, or the dollar numbers that if they change dramatically and don't understand why. That's kind of what the FinCom does now. They trust in the process. They trust in the department heads and the manager to get that all together. And then they just deal with the exceptions. I look at where we're headed with the capital programming. My goal as chair is to develop that same way. It is all part of doing that is developing the program the way we're doing it now, so that anyone can come in and sit in a chair and get their feet wet and have an understanding of how to do what it is they need to do to contribute meaningfully. This congregational kind of planning is a bigger picture aspect of the same thing, where if everyone is on board in terms of what the community wants, the leadership understands that, and it makes it easier not to have to be dealing with, it makes it easier to be putting things off that come up as an emergency, critical, has to be done, when maybe not so much. Maybe that's just the loudest voice in the room that's saying it's, you know, the loudest voices in the room are saying that. It helps to keep everybody on track. It develops the consistency, and then the town gets to work with the exceptions. So instead of going around and putting out fires, we're dealing with more of the way the FinCom does it on an exceptions basis. I understand that could have been more succinct, but I think I kind of articulated it. Is that helpful to you, or is it not? I mean,
I would say what's helpful, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, is for those three groups to just at minimum know what the schedule is, know what the big things are on the horizon and that are coming up more immediately. And like you just said about, I liked what you said about the emergency situation. That may be an emergency by the loudest, but it might not really be what everybody ultimately agrees on. And I don't think it has to be a long meeting. It's more of a check-in. All of these groups, somewhere in here you mentioned it, that it's a tremendous amount of scope for a volunteer committee without dedicated staff. And it's sort of a kill three birds with one stone thing for us a little bit, to have all the groups, so nothing should be a big surprise to anybody.
okay. So basically, I'm going to take a little liberty with that. And what I'm going to take that as is the shorter term is very productive to be doing some of this stuff. And I'm not going to let go of the longer term picture, because I think that as it grows and matures into more of what's written here, it's going to make the emergencies go away even more. It's going to make those louder voices quieter. It's going to help you, when I say you, I mean town administration and finance, I'd like to use this analogy, but get in the car and turn the key and fill it up with gas and make sure the oil's checked and so on and so forth, as opposed to having to rebuild the car and do all these different things. So that's helpful, thank you. Any thoughts, Jason?
Yeah, I'm just listening, thinking about everything. Is it what we're looking for, aligned focus? You have these three entities, you have FinCom, Capcom, Select Board. Making sure we're all focused, but we're all aligned as well. You're looking for more direction long-term. The Select Board has been working for almost a year on strategic planning so we can be more focused. So a loud voice coming from the side is like, yes, that's very important for this thing, but we're focused on this. These are the things that we want to make sure are done in the next 3 to 6 years. Then having Capcom come in and be like, that's great too, but let's look at the next 10 years with these numbers that you're asking for from Ryan or the Hilltop or I'm just trying to, I think it's like all line focused, so we're all on the same page.
Yeah, yes, but yes and a little bit more. So yes, in the sense that is exactly as you said it. 3 to 6 years. Capcom is taking the 3 to 6 years into consideration from the Board of Selectmen and the FinCom's concerns, and also layering in a longer term, the 10-year overlay. But the next set, and I get that that's not what your focus is. You're looking at the three getting together is what we're just talking about. The next set, the next layer in maturity of that development is you have the Nantucket Planning and Economic Development Commission. Primarily they're doing roads now. I mean, I'm not denigrating what they're doing, but it's the Nantucket Planning and Economic Development Commission. So we have that, we have the master plan that they're going to be working on. We have HDC, we have the community, we have concerns of department heads. And if we could get those to kind of coalesce around an aligned focus that's the 10 to 15 and 10 to 20 year, I think it makes it easier for everyone else to do their job. Because everything kind of falls in line. It's like if you have your principles and your morals and you know what they are and you're very clear on your convictions, things come along and they fall into place. Yes, no, maybe, I can help you with that. And if you don't, you're always responding kind of to what's happening around you in a way that's not as productive. Does that help to articulate it at all? Or Jason, does that help you to understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I mean, you're pretty much saying what we've been discussing for a year in strategic planning.
Okay.
Is saying, yes, no, we got it.
Yeah.
We know where we're going. And back to your point, Nat, it changes. Next year we could have 2 new board members, at the select board level. So how do you stay focused? That's why the strategic plan is important.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also I want to add to that planning commission thing.
Yeah.
Not until you're done. I'm just saying, don't.
Yeah, I just want to finish. It also helps the department say, here's what the strategic plan. It's coming out this summer. A lot of them have been paying attention. They're like, okay, great. I'm going to use this for some of my goals that I'd like to see. So it is in line.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's actually helping some of the departments come together.
Yeah.
Right, because we want to fund it, and then we talk to right, FinCom and Capcom, and we're all kind of on the same page.
He's saying what I couldn't say.
Okay.
Select SB, I'm gonna try to do this
There you go.
SB thing somehow.
I
I
keep
don't know if I
saying
can do
select
that
board.
yet, but I'm working on it.
I think you can do it now.
Libby's trying not to laugh.
No, I'm just, move on, please.
So
Sorry, Libby.
SB is number one in everybody's mind, but the town is kind of number one.
Yeah.
It really is. When you look at the whole package, town meeting, town itself, what Nantucket needs. This planning is working through Capcom. I don't think we need to have another, the stuff that we have to fund.
Yeah, I get
It
you.
comes in anyway, sort of like saying DPW is bigger than planning if you want to go breaking it all up. We got to keep it tight in this group. Finance committee, staff, and I kind of make SB and staff the same, kind of, because it really kind of is.
Yeah.
And I think the things that come out of planning are more, they shift around a little bit through our own master plan, which is sort of a different SIP kind of thing, but at the same time, transportation plan, excuse me.
Tip.
And the TIP, but the TIP is part of it. So I think better, using Capcom with planning better is really all we need to do with planning.
Okay.
That's my personal, I think Andrew and Mike would agree with me, but I'm just,
I get
not to
you.
get things more muddied. I just think that keeping the capital, the town administration, BOS, SB, and FinCom tight is the way we need to move forward.
Okay,
I think.
I appreciate that. I'm gonna respond to that in just a second. If anyone has any comments, and then I'll make a comment, we'll close it out for now so we can move on.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna take one last stab at it. So I agree with all that, and I'm not suggesting planning, NP and EDC would, sit down with FinCom and the Board of Selectmen as a budgeting
Yeah,
process
it's not gonna
every year.
happen like that.
What I'm looking at more is that the NP and EDC through the master plan is the voice of the community. There's no other entity that is going to sit down through long-range planning seminars and hearings for the length of time that the master plan takes and get the voice of the community or have access to the community other than the master plan. The master plan costs money. The master plan costs money either in terms of direct capital investment or things that have to be foregone because we're developing areas of the island in certain ways and we're not able to use assets that we might use in Area A because Area B is being developed. I have absolutely no concern with the concept of that. I'm just simply saying that if there's an open dialogue of communication of the bigger picture with NPDDC and the master planning process at the proper time, it helps to inform our decisions and it helps to inform the Board of Selectmen so that at a later date, once there is a master plan, if it's a robust planning process and the community is involved as much as I personally would like it to be, the Board of Selectmen almost have a roadmap. Their strategic plan would be based upon a 20-year plan that the town, the whole community has voted for. And not everyone is going to vote unanimously, but it is a majority, and that's how I think the master plan should be implemented, personally. So I just wanted to say that's not a layer to start tomorrow. It's more of the longer-term idea of how that type of a congregational planning concept would mature. But I do appreciate, Libby, if we can, and we have the chairman of the selectmen here, if we can work on the smaller module, which is getting capital committee and FinCom and select board together, that would be helpful. Okay. Thank you, everyone. That's good information. I'll bring it up again and we'll see where we are at a later date in the year. The next two things are going to segue right into, can we maybe hold off on can I just touch on the capital asset management, centralizing that? We talked about it yesterday a little bit, Libby, Brian, and Julia and I. And the idea there is basically to have, if I can oversimplify it, a way to adequately manage the information that has to do with capital assets and stay informed to make timely decisions, to save money through a program that is self-funded in a sense by having capital project managers part of whatever that program is so that the town isn't paying someone 3% or 2% or whatever a project is, they're paying a salary. So you basically have professional management. This isn't a specific suggestion to start tomorrow. This is a suggestion to get the dialogue going at some point. I know the town is going to be undergoing a review of personnel and positions. Maybe that's something that could be looked at. I don't know. It's not our bailiwick. Our bailiwick was to look at the process that we're involved in and try and recommend improvements that would allow us to do our job better, which means that town is better served through these growing pains of increasing capital budgets. So basically, it would be, you know, the same type of thing as it is now. The town manager is responsible for purchase implementation and maintenance through department heads. Department heads are responsible for custody, care, and control throughout the capital asset life. But there is someone who is working directly for whomever the town manager and the select board determine. I presume it would be through finance, and it would be someone's who are putting the program together so that year-round, the process is a year-round process, and it's not a capital binge process. I'm just putting it out there. I don't know that it's anything we really need to talk about. I think that this is a policy decision. I would like to discuss at some point how we support getting the discussion going, because I'm a firm believer in you can't score if you don't shoot. And if we don't take a shot at it, it's not going to change, because everybody's very busy doing what they're doing in order to keep everything else afloat. So I guess I just entertain any comments, and then we can move on after that, if anyone has any. No. Okay.
I mean, Libby, is this something that you see valuable?
Yeah, we talked about it yesterday. There's just fitting it in.
And would this be one person overseeing, or do you see
I don't know.
people in each department? Somebody in each department assign this as part of their responsibilities?
Well, right now, for the departments that have the larger projects, they assign project managers to those projects. But we're getting to a point
Town
where...
employees, not outside.
Town employees. Although, depending on the project, an owner's project manager might be required. Or a higher level engineer or something like that. But we're at the point, and we've been at the point, where we need to obviously focus more on capital needs. And it's right now a little bit of a lot of people's job. It's started to take over more people's jobs. So I like the idea of a position dedicated to that sort of thing. I just have a bigger picture in my head of everything else that people want to have position-wise, and so this is one of probably half a dozen positions that people say we have to have this. We're at the point where we need this, that sort of thing. So that's why I say it's got to be somehow worked in. And it's not a, you know, it's a higher level position. It's not a clerical. It's somebody who's got some expertise and experience with managing
Half retired.
this kind of thing.
But would that happen naturally with the newer process that's going towards each department? Would that sort of find its way to each department? Each department is responsible for delivering better information for us to make our decisions.
Well, I would imagine this position would help with that. I mean, DPW alone can't even handle the projects that were approved 2 years ago.
Right.
Because there's too much, and there's a lot of things that have happened recently, but over the years, that are regulatory and statutory wise that make projects more complex and complicated, procurement requirements.
Yeah, building a house.
We now, as of January, February, we're having OSHA standards imposed onto all municipalities in the state.
Yeah.
So that might necessitate some kind of a safety compliance officer position, unfunded mandate kind of a thing. So there's just, it's very important, and I'd love to have this position right now. But there's probably 4 or 5 other positions that I would say the same thing about.
Yeah.
And then.
But back to, yes, it's a good idea, yes.
And then what happens when things are slow and you have 4 new high-level people on the payroll. That's what I worry about. I like when Libby says each project is different, some have their own required. I mean, it's hard to like nail that down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No.
Because then you get people saying, well, why'd you hire so many people? And then-
Yeah. It used to be clerk of the works in the old days. Now it's engineer, lawyer, you know.
Procurement expert, project manager.
It's different.
No, I appreciate
That's
that.
it.
All right, and Peter?
Have you seen any of the municipalities that have this position or are trying to model a position after other ones becoming more popular?
I would
or-
say it's becoming more popular, and similar to what I said earlier, it's all over the board, they call it different
Different
things.
things, different
But
responsibilities.
I would say there are more and more municipalities dedicating resources specifically to capital projects.
And capital manager positions in-house, so to
Yeah.
speak. And ones that are similar to Nantucket's profile and demographics and growth and
I would say,
seasonality
yeah.
and trying to almost catch up to where we should be, so
Yeah,
to speak.
and, yeah,
It's a unique place, so
it
I mean,
is,
there's
and we have
a number of
more
others.
stuff than other towns do.
Right, exactly.
But it's definitely something that we'll be talking about in our staffing study that Steve mentioned.
Okay. So just to, thank you. That's helpful to get your feedback on that. And Peter, I appreciate the questions. I just want to close out, in terms of the concept, the idea is to centralize it. And part of that centralization and handling and managing the information is an extension of the database we've been discussing. So that what this also does is it frees up the staff in the finance department in the long-term planning, because not only is the SIP request information going in, it's then being utilized throughout the useful life of the asset by someone who's a manager, who may be managing people who come on per diem to do capital project management. And in that way, you've got professional management. You don't have a host of staff who are professionals, professional level salaries. However, I want to make the point that even if you did, 2 projects that we do for capital would probably pay those salaries for 10 years. So let's keep in mind the cost savings that this would engender almost immediately would be dramatic. And it's not dramatic in terms of, it's not cost savings that we can go and spend someone else, necessarily spend somewhere else. It's cost savings that we're not asking for the money to outlay and then amortize over a schedule of whatever the cost of the project is. So it's a dramatic savings. I think the critical thing there is the idea is centralizing it, because then you can use the database. The information goes into the database with the SIP request form, and then it develops and kind of blossoms into a whole nother data set, which is all the different aspects of the capital asset, which then goes to fill to department heads in terms of maintenance schedules and useful life and planning for replacement and when that happens, so that it almost becomes a systematized series of reports that you can press a couple of buttons, I know I'm oversimplifying slightly, and generate these types of report solutions that inform us, inform finance, and make it a lot easier for people not to have to be doing redundant work. So just to be clear on what, that was the concept. I'm not saying that's how it's going to work if it even ever comes to fruition, but. Any other thoughts? Sorry for talking so fast. I know we got a tight schedule here.
Okay. I'm good.
Okay, so scheduling, we talked about, I'm going to jump, the last 2 items are annual process timeline. And basically, we wanted to work in more over whatever timeline was required in order to fulfill our charge. When I say work in more, there are different things that we need to be doing, which is to better anticipate and assess expected revenue and expenditure trends, and to evaluate affordability and financing strategies, trying to consider what tools and information are best for those purposes in order to make more informed decisions, which again, as Libby said, mentioned, is a tremendous amount of work for a volunteer committee, but also without dedicated staff. The other part of that was a semi-annual procedure where we're reviewing capital projects. We had made a recommendation to twice annually review the status of projects. Where are they? If they're, ideally what this would develop into, I think in very short order, is maybe The first year it'd be some wrinkles, but the second year it would be, we get a report at some point in the season that it makes the most sense in terms of where projects, when they've been started and how far along they are. And then we get an update, which is like exceptions. And then eventually it will just be, these are the report, this is a report of the projects, on schedule, on schedule, on schedule, exception, or a maintenance issue has come up, not maintenance in terms of you gotta fix it with a wrench, but a maintenance in terms of
Yeah.
there may be some other costs involved or something like that. And then we would just discuss that aspect of it in our report. So it's a very simple type of a process, is what I was thinking.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that at least twice a year, probably more like 3 times, we have our own meeting of pretty much what you're saying, and we have a list of all the outstanding capital projects. We call the departments in, they don't have to sit all there at the same time, but one comes in at 11, 11:15, 11, like so on. And we go through every project that they have, and where it is, what, that kind of thing. So maybe we combine it, so we don't have to do it twice.
I think that's
or
wonderful.
6
Yeah.
times.
Yeah, if it's already happening.
Yeah, I mean,
Great
that,
idea.
I don't think we have one scheduled right now, but we are thinking about getting one scheduled because I want to have one before the instructions go out for updating the plan.
okay. And internally, what do we refer to that as?
Yeah, what do we refer to as? I
Project
think we,
review.
like capital project status review, something like that.
Okay, I mean, just so I'm using the same words you are,
Yeah.
when I say,
Yeah.
oh, Libby, what about the capitals? You're gonna be
Yeah.
like,
That's
what?
all we-
That's all we call it.
Capital status review.
Capital
Yeah.
project status review.
I think it's a great follow-up for our committee also, to see what we've approved in the last couple of years and how it's going,
Yeah.
and, keep our mind on it.
Yeah, and there might be,
Yeah.
sometimes little things come up that probably be helpful for you to hear.
Yeah,
Oh, absolutely.
definitely.
Like your liaison people might already know
Yeah.
a little, but
That would be the big picture that we would be getting. I can see the first few years, we have no history to look back on as far as that process and being involved in those meetings, but after 3 or 4 years, you would gain such a big picture that going forward to make recommendations, having that information, that background information is huge. And then you start to see trends on who's performing, who's not, and
Exactly.
you make your basis on that. But
Yeah, it also, as you're saying, we identify trends and in essence, it's accountability and it lends accountability, which then creates responsibility. And it's not that anyone isn't being responsible, but it institutionalizes as a culture in terms of the integrity of the process of managing. So that's awesome, Libby. So I will make a note just to touch base with you, capital project status review, Libby, when Libby does dovetail that. Okay, great. And then that brings us into our schedule, and then we're going to move on to the FY20 and out years that Libby has. So Julia passed out a schedule this morning. I met with Libby, Brian, and Julia were able to make some time for us, which we really appreciate. We know they're busy. What we've done, I'm going to give you the kind of a nutshell, is we've expanded consistent with the discussion we had at the last meeting amongst ourselves, we've expanded the schedule. Before we look at the schedule, though, I'd like you to please draw a line above Thursday, August 2nd, 11 a.m. from left to right. There's a line there, if you just want to draw a line on your sheet.
I love it.
Yeah, just left to right there. So, before I get into what that's all about, the idea here is that we're going to meet more frequently for less time. What I'm hoping to do, I believe, is when we meet with the departments, we'll be meeting with a department head and discussing their current FY requests for between 30 and 45 minutes. We'll discuss their SIP 10-year for approximately 15 minutes. So they'll basically have an hour where we have question and answer time. We'll then reserve 15 minutes for our own discussion amongst members and with Libby. We didn't really have that last year, and we really didn't have the out years. And then that will still give us 15 minutes on an hour-and-a-half meeting schedule if anything else comes up that needs to be addressed, and if not, we can clock out earlier. The idea here is that we're going to have more meetings, but we're going to meet for about a half an hour more over the course of the season. This is, I think, a step towards more of a year-round process. I don't think the year-round process can really come to fruition until we have some type of dedicated staff. It's just not practical for finance and admin to be breaking down the process into parts over the course of the year. They need to do things in chunks in order to be, in order for it to really work for them effectively and efficiently. So this is a start, and I wanted to get feedback, first of all, on the, when I get feedback after I do the run-through, I want to get feedback on what you guys think about the amount of time and breaking it down. The other thing that this accomplishes is it works in a review. There's time to do a review of our FY19 recommendations a couple times during the season, as we did now, but a more brief kind of update. There is time will be built in. I did not include it, the capital project reporting, the status of prior years, which we just discussed with Libby. That I will work in. And the other thing I did propose was that we would kind of just make things a little more clearer in terms of when outstanding information is due, the hard finish date, and whether department heads need to be coming back. I've actually built that in, to list outstanding issues and a return is required, so that we have plenty of time over the course of the review season to determine what other information we need and get it in plenty of time to be making our recommendation, so that I personally am not pressed on the tail end beyond my capacity in order to get a report out, which was a difficulty last year. I do want to mention one other thing before we get into your thoughts on the schedule and Libby's thoughts on the schedule and the amount of time that the hour and a half long meeting. I did meet with FinCom. We were kind of requested to come and discuss our process and schedule with them. I wasn't originally going to be able to attend. I made some changes to get there. I think in a nutshell, it's just best to say that FinCom, it's helpful for FinCom to get information from us in December, because they get a bottleneck, in a way, a bottleneck of information in January when they begin their process. Otherwise, it's just everything comes to them at once in terms of the operating budget, not at once, but pretty closely, and town articles. So for them, as much as the budget doesn't really get finally approved and on the warrant until much later, almost towards the end of the first quarter of the following calendar year,
Yeah.
it's helpful for them to be able to get the information and digest it.
But I think changing the schedule and being earlier and sort of meeting year-round is going to help that.
I hope so. So what we've done is I've set the schedule up in conjunction with discussion yesterday that we would deliver either December 12th or December 19th. I added December 19th. It kind of splits that still before the Christmas break, and it gives us some extra time if we need it. And Libby's going to make sure that the FinCom is using our schedule versus their own. One of the things that came up was, at least insofar as the chairman, is he referred to a schedule that they were using that had us delivering our report mid-December, which was not the schedule we set out October 7th to FinCom and the select board. So hopefully that will also help to create a common expectation, as well as if we do joint meetings, I think that might help work out some wrinkles. So that's what I got on that. I'm sorry, I drew a line here. One of the other things that we're doing this year that we didn't do last year, and again, this is about the whole idea of getting everybody kind of aligned and focused, or at least focused on the same topics, where everybody shakes out in their own, the select board and the FinCom and the capital committee may have different final recommendations. And obviously the Board of Selectmen are the ones that rule, but at least we're on the same page, and we're looking at this, we're the same information, and we understand it with a common understanding because it was presented at one meeting. That's what the process is from May 17th through June 11th. So there's a box kind of in the right-hand column, department and or topic. And what that addresses is what we're doing today. We'll be jumping into the FY20 and out years real briefly. Next week we'll be working to finalize those. June 7th we'll do just a quick pre-joint meeting, rehash if necessary. And then the idea is to meet with Select Board and the FinCom the week of June 11th. There's nothing that mandates it be June 11th, other than we want to kind of get it out of the way for everyone before the summer. And so long as that works for those boards and Libby and Finance, I think that's what's important. Then we jump down to August 2nd, which is really where we're going to jump into our process. We're going to we're going to review special town meeting articles that pertain to capital. We'll start a preliminary review without the departments of the FY20 and the out year changes, anything that's changed since the preliminary that happened in May and June. We get a status update, however brief, if any, on the FY19 recommendations, perhaps if there's a staff study and that's been included. It may just simply be, yep, staff study's going on in that, and the capital asset manager position or direct, whatever that is included in the process. Or not. We'll have an organizational meeting, discuss who wants to be chair, who wants to be vice chair, who wants to be secretary, and obviously, most importantly, I think, is set our liaisons. So that, and we're going to wait until August to do that simply because every year there are some positions that come up for reappointment. So we'll know if someone's different, someone didn't put their name in the hat and there's someone new. And we'll do we'll get a status update from Finance on the database. I'm just hitting the highlights here and then I'll leave it. August 9th, we're targeting the database use meeting. So basically that's going to be for us to come in and sit and a run through of how we access online the RORIs, the rankings of relative importance, so that we'll just be able to input it. We won't be paper and pencil and pass scanning and sending it to Julia and getting it. We're going to systematize that. Brian is on top of that moving forward.
I have no idea what you're talking about. No, I'm kidding.
And that's the target day. And then on the 16th of August, we'll actually start an earnest meeting with department heads. I've tried to set it up so that those departments that we felt based on their list last year may have a pretty well vetted list for this year already. So for instance, solid waste is first. Thank you for that, Brian. And airport is last. And airport would be last, not because they don't have a good plan, but because they typically need state and federal input.
They have different times.
So as opposed to having them coming back and forth and having outstanding issues, it just seemed to make sense to have them come in at one time. This is all subject to a final review by Libby with Libby. And, during the course of the season, the departments might have to be moved around. But I think that we've kind of accomplished what our goals are. Thoughts on specifically on the how much time we're meeting and whether you think it's sufficient, and then open the discussion up on the schedule itself.
I'm good with it.
Yeah.
Good?
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
I'm good.
I want to just thank everybody for the 11 o'clock Thursday. I mean, I don't know what to say.
Okay.
Saving me.
Libby, any further thoughts on scheduler? Okay, great. And then, so the only
Question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
please.
Are you looking to roll in the meetings you're talking about, the review, past project review? Will that alter this?
Yeah, we'll have to add that.
Yeah,
and some of those are already in here.
okay.
But some of it's not, so yes. We do have some placeholders. And then there is a concern I have, Peter McEachern, I know, is just pretty flat out during the August month. But there would be, I think the database access, we can pick up with him. So there may be two meetings that are difficult for him, August 16th and the 23rd, and hopefully we can resolve those, because I think his input is important, obviously, as all members is.
So that early, starting with DPW, we'll have, is that going to be updated much more considering it's much earlier? Or is that going to be a good start? We're going to have good information by then? Or are we pushing it back far enough to where it's going to be tricky for them to get all that info to us?
It's going to be a little bit tricky.
Yeah.
Are we trying to change that whole cycle and get them used to this over the next few years?
Yeah,
I understand.
we are. But,
Yeah.
and right now, it's just, there's a lack of resources. It's Rob doing this stuff and himself. And he doesn't
Yeah,
have-
because, I mean,
That's, yeah.
you know, around, I
So we're
mean,
just gonna have to try to figure out how to work with it.
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
just have more meetings.
late August, Island starts to clear out. So I mean, I can see a little bit of alleviation when we're starting our meetings, which is, I think, good.
For
But
you all. Yeah.
for us, I don't know, I mean.
Not for the town departments.
No, I'm sure the department heads are still full on, but I just
Yeah.
don't know if that's gonna be, I wanna make sure that we're not just sitting here and we don't have really all the information we
Yes,
need.
no, we, yeah.
Yeah, we've discussed this, and it's gonna be, it's, I mean, I don't mean to be, but you gotta have the information in, and if you don't have the information, it's not gonna get processed. It's pretty simple.
I think
Maybe-
what we
maybe-
said to ourselves about DPW and sewer a little bit, because
We're breaking
those
things
were
up.
sort of resets last year, and neither of them have the resources they need to really polish this up and
Right.
perfect it to perfection. But I think that for the fiscal 19 projects, the current projects, I don't think a lot's going to change because it wasn't the reset year. I think when we talked yesterday, we felt as though they were, for the most part, done almost.
Yeah.
And I should have prefaced my statement with what Libby just said. I'm not saying, if you don't get it in, that's it.
Right.
The schedule is set up with the presumption that DPW and most certainly solid waste, that first week, and then general, they have a pretty well vetted list already from last year. So we're putting them first, not,
I mean, they have
We're putting
three things
yeah.
that they're involved with.
We're putting them first because they have a plan in place.
Cool, so,
And we don't think it will change much.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could also
Sorry.
schedule them according to who could be ready by then.
Yeah.
Just to get them out of the way, you know, if
Yeah.
IT knows what they're,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
schedule them in so that, you know, that,
Yeah, so we talked about that yesterday too, and
Yeah, and Libby's gonna look through it
Yeah.
with that eye once
Yeah.
we got the dates. Basically, we wanted to bring it to you guys and make sure that we were all on board with the frequency of the meetings and the duration of meetings and just kind of the general approach. And then, your point's well taken, Christie. Whoever can come first, you know,
yeah.
let's get them out of the
I
way
think
and
that's a better
be
way
done
to
with
look
it.
at it.
So we're not, the idea isn't to stress the department heads past their capacity just so that they fit into our schedule. There's no sense in that as far as any of us is concerned. Any other comments? Is that good?
yeah, it's all
Okay. Any other comments on schedule? Okay. So, Libby, we've got,
okay, I can burn through this.
cool, because we're like only into an hour of this meeting, so we're
I know.
good.
Okay, so this,
Hour and a
I
half
mentioned to
schedule.
Steve yesterday, I wanted to tell you some things that I think are possibly coming up in fiscal 20. This is a very, very preliminary draft. I've thrown these things into a file. They are not refined at all, but they are things that have been discussed, okay? Parking garage, parking lots, 2 fairgrounds and the town lot. They need to be redone. And I'm not even gonna give you numbers on this stuff, because I don't want anybody to fall in love with them. The town pier, Pulpus Harbor dredging, supplemental funds, seasonal employee housing, either a feasibility study or a full-on plan. New municipal building, question mark, question mark, question mark. Feasibility study for senior/community center, funds for the disposition of the fire station property. Newtown sidewalk, Newtown Road sidewalk. Completion of in-town bike path along Orange Street. Construction funds, we have design now for the intersection improvement projects at Four Corners, Bartlett, Surfside, Fairgrounds, and Old South. And by the way, sidebar, hopefully you all know there's an informational
Yeah,
session
six.
tonight.
Oh, I'm so glad you reminded me.
6 o'clock at the high school cafeteria on those.
Yeah, and just for the public record, we're fine to attend as long as we don't deliberate about anything capital comm. So if there's more than 2 of us there. And do you have more? Because if you could slow down just a little tiny bit, that would help me a lot.
Oh, sorry. Do I have more?
Do you have more on the list?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I was trying to burn through.
No, it's cool, it's cool. I just can't write that fast.
We may or may not have projects that come out of our coastal resiliency plan. I just don't know what they might be yet. I mentioned seasonal employee dorm, I mentioned fairgrounds, Hopeless Harbor Town Pier. But those are the main big things that I think are not really in there for 2020 right now, that may be coming.
What about Seven Water?
How about what?
Is it the old
That's sort of
police
on the
building?
back burner now,
Is that
isn't it? Old police station.
downtown?
Well, until we figure out what we're doing with the new municipal building.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, that's kind of like not,
Is that like new?
It's
Like,
all-
it's still with Phil Stambaugh at this point.
The most
No.
recent feasibility study that we had for municipal office space was, the proposal recommendation thought at the time was construct a new municipal facility at 2 Fairgrounds Road and move most town employees out of the town building to that, do some amount of renovations to the current town building, to move the sheriff in there, and give the courts some additional space, and potentially lease out 20 South, the old police station, to a group that could potentially turn that into a more functional visitor center and/or community center. But that has gone.
So how many years out is that?
It's however many years out people want to make it a priority.
I mean,
Right.
0 to 40.
Yeah.
It's-
yeah, that's a,
And just if I may, this is where having the benefit of congregational planning with the
Exactly.
community involved and the
Yeah.
master plan would make a huge difference, because we would have identified maybe the things we want to have in certain areas, and we would know that putting a visitor center there was a good idea, or in 10 years, we were going to kick ourselves for doing it. So that was just a topical comment.
but that, this issue, it's 20, is it 20 South, whatever.
20.
the heck it is,
20.
20. That's a perfect example of like how things just change overnight. It was all based on the 37 Washington Street sort of confusion, and we're moving, and we're gonna put finance back over here, and Paula was gonna get bigger, and then we were gonna put the harbor master building over at 37. I mean, all that's gone in 3 years, because, and it's not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. You're better off doing nothing than doing something wrong.
No, it costs.
You know what I'm saying?
Well,
But,
You gotta do the right thing.
Well, that's what I mean. The right, that's what I meant. The right thing is better than
It's gonna-
just doing something.
But,
come up every year
but also,
sometime.
just remember, in the meantime, we have buildings that are becoming progressively problems. 2 Fairgrounds is not in good condition.
Well, yeah, but-
37 Washington Street is not in great, is, got issues.
And we talk
Town
about-
building has issues.
And you
20
talk
South
about new
Water.
people, we're running out
Nowhere
of
to put
space to
them.
put
Yeah,
them.
but that's, but
We're
that
losing
building
space
over
rapidly.
here is never gonna fall down. It's just not the right,
well, it's-
today's
it-
office
It's
type
going to leak, though.
When you,
thing.
when you say community center, what does that mean? Just for public to kind of, like bathrooms and stuff?
Community center would be a place where the public could have events, activities, kids could have stuff there. There's a growing trend, I would say, in municipalities to have a senior/community center.
parking.
Big function building,
It's such
meetings.
critical space though. I mean, that is,
That needs to be fluffier.
We're starting, we're gonna start seeing, this is a congregational meeting topic too, maybe, we're gonna start seeing some real issues with, say, meeting space. Pretty soon, this room
Don't
is
tell
not-
anyone yet.
No, they need to start thinking about it.
We want to
I
start
know.
booking our rooms before everyone knows.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
it's too late, it's too late.
This room is gonna
10 years.
become unavailable largely for meetings when the fire station is built.
Yeah.
So
It
we're
is?
gonna have to meet elsewhere.
There's a
Yeah.
closet over
Why?
at the
You need a
Plus
training
building we
room.
can
This
use.
is a training room here, and they hardly ever,
We're training.
they're kicked out of it all the time.
Yeah,
Okay.
the fire station's got classes all the time. They're
You
gonna-
do?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna have.
Alright,
That's
alright.
all insurance.
Well,
This is the
it's,
kind of
the point's well taken, resources are stretched, it's a zero-sum game. The bigger point, I think, is proper planning prevents piss poor performance, and we're gonna have to suck it up at some point and spend time on that to get ahead.
Well, wherever the new meeting place is, it can't be in town. It's gotta be out of town.
Yeah, well, we're gonna wrestle with that. Can
Nowhere
I,
else.
No,
in town.
where's the parking coming from? I mean, we don't wanna
It
go
can't
back
be
to
in
that.
town,
Garage.
right,
Okay.
exactly.
we're not gonna solve that
Garage
today.
is a different situation.
We're gonna find a place to meet. Right now, we're booked up for this season, we're good to go. We're gonna move forward everyone's gonna be wrestling with that issue, and that's, to my mind, that's an example of why a plan should change. Not, well, we didn't plan 10 years out in advance, so the plan changes every 3 years. There's a difference between those two things.
Yeah.
The fact that the training room is gonna be not available for a multitude of town public bodies is a little bit different. All that aside,
Yeah.
I just want to focus, if we may, on the out year, FY20 and out years. There's a couple things I didn't hear, and I wanted to know maybe if, I'm not suggesting that they be on the list, but I think that they're important. And it came up tangentially, which is maintenance, and I think I would suggest that when we meet with DPW facilities, my personal feeling is it costs more money to delay the maintenance than it does, when you got to build a new building, it costs a lot more than it did to maintain it. So maintenance is going to be a big thing in my mind.
I just didn't say that because that's an operating budget.
That's a cultural.
Okay, I just meant from the capital perspective of do more now than have us have to say, oh, we need a new building. I know you're doing that work. I'm just bringing it up as a topic for focus point future. And then the other thing I was just wondering is it came up in discussion here, and I think at a couple other, or at least one other committee, there are like transportation related smaller projects that seem to be put off. And I'm just wondering who would someone speak to about that? For instance, Prospect Street, where you go to Milk and you can't navigate that corner. And it's been on, it was a 2016 request that I think went in, and I think it may have been approved, but maybe it wasn't approved and it didn't go forward. And the idea was to slightly widen that out. And the reason I bring it up is more of an example, because we subsequently did road work in that area, and it would have been a good time perhaps if that had been in a list of things. I guess my point is it would be good to have those things on as a placeholder, so it'll be a reminder to everyone when something comes up to be like, oh, we could take this off the list too, because we're going to be there working. Or they may say, well, we're not going to be able to do it for whatever reason, but at least it's there and it's visible. Libby, does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what happened with, if you're talking about the bike path or the.
Yeah, I think there's a connector bike path that was going to go from New Mill past the Quaker
That's
Cemetery. Is that what cemetery is that?
That's gonna happen. That stuff is
Okay,
actually,
no.
that's on paper.
That's like
Mike's
the, behind the Prospect Street, right?
Up
Goes
Chicken Hill subdivision
Yeah.
thing.
No, I'm not talking about, I'm talking about there was going to be a connector from what was approved for the Chicken Hill work
Yeah,
that connects, basically when you go to, you're headed out to Nantucket, there's like the Nantucket, the landfill corridor. So you go from the windmill to Milk Street, and that corner is very hard to navigate. It gets a lot of traffic and foot traffic, and then you go through that intersection and there's no footpath for that area.
so the idea
Prospect Street.
was
Right.
that connection be made from over Chicken Hill, over to Joy Street, connect to the Milk Street bike path, go up Milk Street and down Wynn.
That's right.
And we have funding for a Wynn Street
Fixing.
improvement project. There's also some takings that need to be done, so it's not entirely public. And that would be your connection over to Mackin. At one point, there was some discussion about a bike path / pedestrian walkway on Quaker. However, if
Yeah.
you may or may not recall, that ran into difficulty with people who felt that there were
Cemetery.
graves in the way.
Okay. So that specific example aside, I guess the question is, or the concern I have is that we're making sure the departments are identifying those types of projects so that they are on a list.
Yes.
So the part, I got sidetracked a little with the bike path, but the bigger concern is that road is constricted. It's like a little bottleneck, and widening it would be, as a citizen, I'm not saying let's put it on the list, I'm just using it as an example, is that area where widening that street so people can get through, get a lot of trucks, 10-wheelers coming in and through there, and then you have pedestrian type vehicles, SUVs and bicycles that will be addressed with the bike path. how do you envision items like that are packaged or listed so that they're included in the SIP for planning purposes, dollar-wise?
Well, generally, those types of things come through the transportation planner.
Right.
And sometimes they get onto the transportation improvement plan, which is under review right now. The comment period ends when, Monday? So that might be something. The planning commission is taking it up. Matt, do you know when?
No.
Sometime soon.
I know the thing he's talking about, though, a little bit more.
So
Deeply.
there's various intersection areas that I believe the transportation planner has identified as, you know, I don't know what you call it, these intersections of
Little
concern or
improvement
something like
stuff.
that. Yeah. So I'm not quite sure where that exact intersection stands.
Sure, yeah, and I don't need to get bogged down on that. I guess it's more of an example of how do we make sure through you as capital that things like that, not just transportation, but other departments, that the department heads are focused. I understand they got a lot going on, but they need to start focusing on conceivably what is reasonable for me to be requesting funding for the next 10 years. Not just what's on my plate and I'm going to get this year and then I'm going to put off a year, or the big stuff.
Yeah.
But a fuller, broader thing, and I understand it's not going to happen tomorrow. I'm just bringing it up. I'll bring it up again at a later date. The idea is that we're getting the fullest, broadest SIP that we can.
Yeah.
So it's accurate.
They're certainly encouraged to do that, and everybody has their own idea about where the improvements should or shouldn't happen.
Sure. Which you filter.
Yes, but I mean, just in general, like, you might think that's a real issue, that intersection, and other people might say, yeah, sort of, but these other 10 intersections over here are worse.
Sure, but my job isn't to, what I think is an individual doesn't matter in that regard. I'm just saying in terms of, so that for a capital planning process, we've reasonably identified as many projects that we think, we, being the town, you filter, think actually could occur in the next 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's our general philosophy
Yeah, no,
to do, yeah.
I'm just saying that I'm using an example of one that I didn't see anywhere.
Okay.
So I'm using an example of something that may have kind of fell through the cracks, not at your office, but in general. And I'm wondering, how do we deal with that through you so that department heads are...
I don't know, I just jotted a note to myself to ask Mike about it, but you could also use your liaisons to talk about stuff.
Okay, that's fine. I don't want to be going around.
You're not going around anything. This is one of those, just real quick, think of this little prospecty thing
Yeah.
as like 3 parts of the straight wharf, turning right at Easy Street stuff. It's the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
It isn't, it's, Mike's got it highlighted with like marker pen on a plan. Okay, we're gonna push the curbing back after, what's her name's, Pat Tyler's old house. We're gonna push that back 3 feet. That's all we're gonna do though, right there. And then we're gonna fix that little, we're gonna take that curb, which you know, when you wind around the corner towards Milk, that curbing can go back a foot. 1 foot will make that turn for trucks and these oncoming issues the biggest thing ever, just to fix that. Then we've got the pole issue, which is like a whole nother project to get that stuff put on the ground. So it's not, this is not a project, this is something DPW probably has some kind of money through, whether it's the sidewalk money that we're getting by the way, are we gonna put that back in? Because they must be using it all up right now. We must be putting that back in every.
I think there's some already in.
So we're doing that $1 million a year, whatever thing is a standard, right? I just brought that up because I thought of it.
I don't have.
I think we went down to $500,000 this year.
I knew we did
because-
something to change it because we didn't do anything yet. Now we're doing everything at once. But what I'm saying is, you see how easy it is to move curbing if it's not in cement? That's not in cement. That can happen in like 3 days. Victor could do that. I don't think that's something that's, I think that's other stuff like DPW, small fixy things versus a plan. You know what I mean? Am I saying that right?
I can't.
It's not gonna happen in one shot.
I get you. So Libby,
You know, the improvements on Prospect.
yeah, I understand. I think, thank you, that's point well taken.
Sorry.
No, it's good, But
But
Libby,
like with this feeder thing, just real quick.
yeah,
If and when that NGA thing, whatever it's called, happens, I guarantee you that DPW has, or Mike, because they're working better together, Mike and Rob, to say, okay, when this happens, we gotta fix this curb, we gotta fix that. You know, certain things are gonna get fixed when this stuff is all blown up.
So,
That's really not a SIP thing, that's more of internal stuff. I
Libby,
think.
you're reasonably comfortable along the lines of what Nat's saying, that some of these smaller things may not be part of a SIP. They're gonna get picked up, but overall, the department heads are looking at a kind of a robust list.
Yeah.
That's all I just wanted to make sure
And
we were.
included in the robust list is, let's do everything that needs to be done to this road at one time. Water, sewer, stormwater, road work, sidewalks, underground wires, if we can.
Gotcha, makes sense.
Sometimes things get complicated if you need to take some property. It's not very easy to get all the utilities coordinated to do their undergrounding at the same time. And that takes, I'm not even kidding, years
Well,
of planning.
the thing that
On that
happened with
part.
Prospect, we know
I
it
get
happened. Water company did that without, it just happened, and all of a sudden the road's closed, and we didn't fix anything. It just
Hindsight.
happened. It was a bad deal, and it was a switch over with DPW as well, all in one.
But they're learning from it, and that's
Yeah, I
what's
think they are,
important.
I think they are.
So, comments otherwise, and I'm just gonna ask Brian for a 30-second update on the database before we announce the date of our next meeting and adjourn. Unless there's committee reports, I don't think there probably are, but.
This is the committee.
So, can you just give us a quick when we expect what at this point?
We're working with a development company who's supposed to have us a quote next week. We've sent them a copy of the SIP request form. We've worked through the amount of users, what that would look like. We've worked through possible just a couple reports, not 500 reports, most likely just 2 reports that we'd be able to create very quickly through this. They're going to give us a quote Monday, hopefully. We will sign an agreement rapidly with them. The goal is to have it available to use by the middle of July for the department heads to be able to start putting it in. One of the things that we're working on finalizing through the process is what parameters and fields we want required before you can actually save it and finalize it, to make sure that we're capturing all the documentation. Then the next phase is going to be the Rory, which I think Stephen may have actually made my goal of hitting the August 9th date much easier yesterday in our discussions on how to do that. So they know they're under a very tight deadline, and they've said that they can hit all of the deadlines we've given them so far. So the goal is then on the 9th to be able to show everybody how to log in. It's going to be cloud-based through Amazon Web Services, encrypted, so that we can make sure it gets protected, and then we will just continue working phase by phase to eventually get to the end goal.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. It's helpful just for us to have an understanding. So guys, the next meeting, Libby, we'll have the FY20 and out years preliminary from departments on the 24th.
The anticipation.
Okay, so that's our meeting on the 24th. It will be Thursday at 11 a.m. here. Here? Yes.
Yes.
And.
That's not with the departments.
No. We're not meeting with department heads until August 9th. No, August 16th. And motion, any other comments or anything for the good of the order? Anyone like to state or request? No, we're good? Goodish?
Thank you for all your hard work, man.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the support.
Good environments.
Look forward to this year.
Okay, excellent.
Motion.
Ending on a good note, motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
So.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. Again.